And then the Army decided that they needed to have people counteracting McNamara's Whiz kids. And so they figured that somebody who'd been teaching math probably could. So they sent me to the University of Michigan to get a degree in what turned out to be operations research, but the Army sent me to get a degree in automatic data processing, which they didn't have such a thing at Michigan, but the closest thing to it was industrial engineering operations research. So I spent 2 years there getting a degree, and then rather than go back to the Pentagon for a utilization tour, I volunteered to go to Vietnam.
When you say that the Army knew that they needed someone to counteract the Whiz kids, and I've talked about the Whiz kids and I've covered them somewhat because a lot of the people operational on the ground said, hey, these statistics that you're coming up with don't take into account the human aspect of this conflict in Vietnam. So was that something that was felt and understood inside the Army at that time? I mean, clearly it was.
Yes, and the whole idea was to take somebody who knew something about the Army and give him some education to these kids, so-called kids, had, and statistical analysis and all that stuff, and so to be the other part of the board, and that was to be my utilization tour.
Yeah.
So
there's a great example of that, and it's the Battle of the Ia Drang Valley, and Colonel Moore talks about it. The fact that what the Whiz kids basically said, well, one of the things that they said was, okay, we can kill 170 Vietnamese soldiers for every one of ours that they kill. So statistically, we'll just keep running that problem over and over again, and we'll end up winning. And I always point out, and which everyone points out, and I'm sure you would point it out as well, is what they didn't take into account is the fact that, number one, 170 Vietnamese killed to the Vietnamese was not as big of a deal as we thought it would be, and we also didn't take into account that one American dead is a lot bigger than the statisticians thought it would be to us, and that's just a huge tragedy to go into that situation like that.
Well, in fact, I've many times thought body count was the dumbest thing we've ever come up with as a measure of success in combat. And I have said that I don't know how many times, and I am still convinced that was the dumbest thing we've done over the time. And I was there participating in it, and it was terrible.